The gunshot that rang out through Dodge City's Main Street that scorching July afternoon in 1878 was not meant for Martha Owens, but it sent her diving behind a water trough nonetheless. Hands pressed over her ears, trembling so violently that her teeth chattered despite the Kansas heat pressing down like a wool blanket soaked in fire. Samuel Anderson had been leading his horse to the livery stable when the sound cracked through the air. A drunk cowhand celebrating nothing more than his own foolishness with a pistol pointed skyward. Samuel's reaction was automatic, honed by years of cattle drives and range wars. His hand went to his own weapon, his body tensed, and his voice erupted in a commanding bellow that could carry across a stampeding herd. "Put that damn gun away before I make you eat it." The words hammered through the dusty air with all the force of thunder, and Martha, still crouched behind the trough with her hands over her ears, flinched so hard she nearly toppled into the muddy water pooled at its base. Samuel saw the movement from the corner of his eye as the drunk cowhand wisely holstered his weapon and stumbled toward the saloon. The tall cowboy turned his attention to the woman behind the trough, taking in her pale face, the way her whole body seemed to have folded in on itself, making her small frame even smaller. "Madam," Samuel said, his voice still carrying that parade ground volume he used when working cattle. "You all right there?" Martha's eyes went wide, and she pressed herself harder against the rough wood of the trough, her fingers white-knuckled where they gripped the rim. Samuel frowned, taking a step closer, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust. "I said, are you?" He stopped mid-sentence because Martha had actually scrambled backward, scraping her palms on the dirt, her bonnet falling back to reveal auburn hair that had escaped its pins in wild tendrils around her face. Her eyes were the color of creek water in spring, green and clear, but right now they were fixed on him with something that made his stomach turn cold despite the heat. Fear. Pure, undiluted fear. Samuel had seen that look before, in the eyes of horses that had been beaten, in dogs that had known more kicks than kindness. He had never thought to see it directed at him from another human being, and something in his chest tightened painfully. He took a deliberate step backward, raising his hands slowly, and when he spoke again, he had to consciously lower his voice to something approaching normal conversation. "I am not going to hurt you, madam. Just wanted to make sure you were not injured." Martha swallowed hard, her throat working visibly. She managed to get her feet under her, though she kept the water trough between them like a fortress wall. Up close, Samuel could see she was probably in her early 20s, with a spattering of freckles across her nose and a mouth that looked like it might have been quick to smile before something had taught it to be afraid instead. "I am fine," she said, and her voice was surprisingly steady despite the way her hands shook as she tried to brush the dust from her simple calico dress. "Thank you for your concern, sir." The formality of it stung. Samuel nodded slowly, keeping his hands visible, keeping his distance. "Name is Samuel Anderson. I work the Triple Bar Ranch about 10 miles north of town. Martha Owens." She said it quickly, perfunctorily, like she was checking off a social obligation before she could escape. Her eyes darted past him, looking for a clear path back toward the row of shops that lined the main street. "You need an escort somewhere, Miss Owens. These streets can be no." The word came out sharper than she had probably intended, and she softened it with visible effort. "No, thank you. I can manage on my own." Samuel watched her hurry away, moving fast enough that it was almost a run, her skirts kicking up dust with each step. He stood there for a long moment, his horse nudging his shoulder impatiently, wondering what kind of hell that woman had walked through to make her look at a man like she expected him to strike her at any moment. The answer came 3 days later when Samuel was in town again, this time picking up supplies at Porter's general store. He was reading through his list, his voice a low rumble as he called out items to Old Man Porter when he heard it. A crash from the back room, the sound of glass breaking, and then a man's voice raised in anger. "Clumsy, stupid woman. That was a whole jar of preserves." Samuel's head came up, and he saw Martha appear in the doorway that led to the storeroom, her face drained of color, her hands clutched in front of her. Behind her came a man Samuel recognized as Horace Porter, the old man's nephew, who had taken over much of the store's management in recent months. Horace was red-faced, his jowls quivering with rage, and when he raised his voice again, Samuel saw Martha actually shrink, her shoulders coming up as if to ward off a blow. "You have any idea what that costs? That is coming out of your wages, every last cent." "I am sorry," Martha whispered, but her words were lost under Horace's continued tirade. "Sorry does not clean up the mess. Sorry does not replace good merchandise. I swear, taking you on was the worst decision I ever made. You are useless, absolutely useless." Samuel felt his jaw tighten. He took a step forward, ready to add his own voice to the situation, ready to tell Horace Porter exactly what he thought of a man who talked to a woman that way. But then he caught Martha's eye, saw the way she had gone absolutely rigid, waiting for him to shout, waiting for more noise and anger, and something made him stop. Instead, he cleared his throat quietly and spoke in a voice pitched low and calm, the kind of voice he might use with a spooked calf. "Pardon me, but I was hoping Miss Owens might help me with something." Both Horace and Martha turned to look at him. Horace's face was still mottled with anger, but he bit back whatever he had been about to say. Samuel was 6 feet 2 inches of solid muscle, with a reputation in these parts as a man who was slow to anger but absolute hell when he got there. Horace might have been willing to bully a woman, but he was not fool enough to antagonize Samuel Anderson. "What do you need?" Horace asked, his voice still carrying an edge of irritation. "I've got a long list here, and I am particular about some of these items. If Miss Owens would not mind helping me select them, I would be obliged." Samuel kept his tone mild, reasonable, giving no indication that he had heard the shouting or noticed Martha's distress. Horace waved a hand dismissively. "Fine, fine. Martha, help Mr. Anderson, and clean up that mess in the back when you are done." "Yes, Mr. Porter," Martha said quietly. Samuel moved to the far end of the store, away from Horace, and Martha followed after a moment's hesitation. He pulled out his list, making a show of squinting at his own handwriting, though the words were perfectly legible. "I need about 20 pounds of flour," he said, his voice still pitched low and gentle. "And I am particular about the quality. Would you mind showing me what you have?" Martha led him to the flour barrels, her movements careful and controlled. Samuel noticed the way she kept glancing back toward where Horace was muttering over his ledgers, the way she seemed to be calculating distances and escape routes, even as she went through the motions of showing him the merchandise. "This is good quality," she said softly, indicating one of the barrels. "It came in fresh last week." Samuel nodded. "I will take 20 pounds of that then." He paused, then added even more quietly, "Are you all right, Miss Owens?" her hand stilled on the scoop she had been reaching for. "I am fine, Mr. Anderson. Because if someone was treating you poorly, there are people in this town who would help." Martha's laugh was bitter and short. "Are there? That is kind of you to say, but Mr. Porter is well respected in Dodge City. He gives me a job and a place to live in the room above the store. I have nowhere else to go." Samuel measured out his next words carefully. "A job that treats you right is different from a job that treats you like property." "Perhaps." Martha started scooping flour into a cloth sack, her movements efficient despite the slight tremor in her hands. But it is still better than the alternative I had before. There was a story there, Samuel could tell, but he did not push. Instead, he continued working through his list, keeping his voice low and calm, noting the way Martha gradually relaxed a fraction as they worked together. She had a quick mind for numbers, calculating his bill in her head faster than he could have written it down. And when she spoke about the merchandise, there was an intelligence in her observations that suggested education beyond what most frontier women received. When they were done, Samuel paid his bill and tipped his hat to Martha, careful to keep his movements slow and predictable. "Thank you for your help, Miss Owens. I appreciate your patience with my particular ways." Something flickered across her face, might have been the ghost of a smile. "You are welcome, Mr. Anderson." As Samuel loaded his supplies into his wagon, he found himself thinking about Martha Owens, about the fear in her eyes and the resignation in her voice. The Triple Bar Ranch kept him busy most days, but Dodge City was only 10 miles away, and he found himself making more trips to town than strictly necessary over the following weeks. Each time, he made a point to do his shopping at Porter's General Store. Each time, he kept his voice low and his movements careful around Martha. And each time, he saw her relax a little more, saw the tension in her shoulders ease just slightly when she realized he was not going to suddenly bellow at her or make any quick, threatening movements. It was during his 4th visit, when he was looking at a selection of work shirts and Martha was showing him the stitching on different options, that she finally spoke to him about something beyond business. "You are different from most men," she said quietly, glancing toward the front of the store where Horace was occupied with another customer. "You do not yell." Samuel fingered the fabric of a blue cotton shirt. "Yelling does not get much accomplished in my experience." "Most men seem to think otherwise. Most men are fools." Samuel said it matter-of-factly, without heat. "My father was a yeller. Thought volume made him right. All it did was make everyone around him miserable and teach me what kind of man I did not want to be." Martha looked at him for a long moment, and he saw something shift in her eyes, some wall coming down just a fraction. "That is a hard lesson to learn." "Yes, madam, it was, but some lessons are worth the learning." After that, their conversations grew longer. Samuel learned that Martha had come to Dodge City from Missouri 2 years ago, fleeing a situation she would not talk about in detail. But that had left her with those Flinched reactions and that bone-deep wariness. She had been working for Horace Porter for 18 months, enduring his temper because it came with a roof over her head and enough money to save a little each month toward some vague future where she might have options. "I want to have my own dress shop someday," she told him once, her voice carrying a wistful note that made her sound younger than her 23 years. "I am good with a needle, and I have ideas about patterns and styles. But it takes money to start a business, and I am a long way from having enough." "How much do you need?" Samuel asked. Martha looked at him suspiciously. "Why, just curious." "I need about $200 to rent a space, buy fabric and equipment, and have enough to live on while I build up clientele." She said it like she was reciting an impossible dream. "At the rate I can save, it will take me 5 more years, assuming Mr. Porter does not find more reasons to dock my pay." Samuel filed that information away and said nothing more about it, but his mind was working. The Triple Bar Ranch paid him well. He had been saving for years, living simply in the bunkhouse despite being the ranch foreman, and he had accumulated a fair sum. $200 was not nothing, but it was not impossible either. The problem was, he knew Martha would never accept charity, not from him or anyone else. The pride in her, bent as it was by whatever circumstances had brought her here, was still strong enough that she would refuse any handout. He needed to find another way. The solution presented itself on a sweltering August morning when Samuel rode into town to find the main street buzzing with news. The Dodge City Ladies Association was organizing a fair to raise money for a new schoolhouse, and they were looking for volunteers and sponsors. Samuel found himself at the registration table before he had fully thought through his plan, putting his name down as a sponsor and making a generous donation that had the association president, a formidable woman named Constance Hartley, beaming at him. "Mr. Anderson, this is most generous. Is there any particular part of the fair you would like to support?" Samuel rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture he fell into when he was thinking. "Well, madam, I was wondering if the fair might include some kind of contest for dressmaking or sewing. I know there are a lot of talented women in this town, and it seems like that would be a good draw." Constance's eyes lit up. What a wonderful idea, and perhaps the winner could receive a prize to encourage participation. "I would be happy to sponsor that prize," Samuel said. "Say, $50 and an order for 3 custom dresses." The amount was generous enough to raise eyebrows, but Constance was too pleased to question his motives. Within a week, the dressmaking contest was the talk of Dodge City, and Samuel made sure to stop by Porter's General Store to mention it to Martha. "Have you heard about this contest?" he asked, keeping his tone casual as he examined a display of canned goods. Martha was dusting shelves nearby, and she nodded. "Everyone is talking about it. The prize is quite substantial." "Are you going to enter?" She shook her head quickly. "I could not. Mr. Porter would never give me the time off to prepare something, and besides, I do not have money to spare for fancy fabric." Samuel had anticipated this. What if you had a commission? Someone asking you to make them something specific, paying you for the materials and your time? Martha's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I need a new shirt," Samuel said, which was not exactly a lie. He could always use a new shirt. "Something nicer than my usual work clothes, for when I have to go to church or attend meetings with the ranch owner. If I paid you to make it, you would have reason to buy fabric and work on it in your own time, and if you decided to enter that shirt in the contest, well, that would be your choice." He watched understanding dawn in her eyes, followed quickly by suspicion. "Why would you do that?" "Because I need a shirt and you need a chance." Samuel met her gaze steadily. "No charity, Miss Owens, just business. You make me a shirt, I pay you fair price for materials and labor. What you do with your work after that is entirely up to you." Martha worried her lower lip between her teeth, clearly torn. Finally, she nodded slowly. "Fair price means $3 for materials and $2 for my labor." "Fair price means $3 for materials and $5 for your labor," Samuel countered. "I have seen your work, Miss Owens. It is worth $5 of anyone's money." They settled on $4 for labor, and Samuel counted out the $7 from his wallet. Martha's hand trembled slightly as she took the money, and he saw hope bloom in her face, bright and almost painful to witness. "I will make you the finest shirt you have ever owned, Mr. Anderson." "I do not doubt it." Over the next 2 weeks, Samuel found excuses to stop by the store regularly, ostensibly to check on his shirt's progress but really to see Martha. Each time he noticed small changes. She stood a little straighter. She met his eyes more often. And when Horace raised his voice, which he did with depressing regularity, she did not fold quite so completely, though Samuel noticed she still flinched. The night of the fair arrived with temperatures still hovering in the 90s even after sunset. Samuel cleaned up, putting on his better pair of trousers and a vest, and rode into town as the first lanterns were being lit along the main street. The fair had taken over the square in front of the courthouse, with booths selling everything from pies to handcrafted furniture, games for children, and a platform where a fiddler was starting to warm up. The dressmaking entries were displayed in the courthouse itself, where it was marginally cooler. Samuel made his way through the crowd, nodding to people he knew until he found the display. There were perhaps 20 entries, everything from simple day dresses to elaborate evening gowns that would have been more at home in a St. Louis ballroom than on the Kansas prairie. And there, on a dress form in the corner, was his shirt. Samuel stopped in front of it, genuinely impressed. Martha had taken his measurements the week before, her hands quick and professional as she worked with her tape measure, and she had translated those numbers into something extraordinary. The shirt was made from deep blue cotton, the color of the sky just after sunset, with pearl buttons and stitching so fine it was nearly invisible. The collar was perfectly shaped, the shoulders had just the right amount of ease for movement, and she had added subtle details, a small amount of decorative stitching along the button placket, cuffs that could be rolled back and secured with small tabs, that elevated it from merely functional to genuinely handsome. "What do you think?" Samuel turned to find Martha standing beside him. She had dressed with care for the evening, wearing what was probably her best dress, a simple gray cotton that she had clearly altered herself to fit her perfectly. Her hair was pinned up in a neat arrangement, and her face was flushed with heat and nervousness. "I think it is the finest shirt I have ever seen," Samuel said honestly. "Miss Owens, you have a real gift." Her flush deepened, but this time with pleasure. "Thank you, I worked hard on it." "It shows," Samuel gestured to the other entries. "I think you have got a real chance here." "I hope so." Martha clasped her hands in front of her. "But even if I do not win, this was good for me. It reminded me that I have skills, that I can make things, that I am not just." She trailed off, but Samuel could fill in the rest. Not just Horace Porter's whipping girl, not just someone to be yelled at and blamed for every small mishap. The judging took an hour, with 3 local women examining each entry carefully, discussing quality of stitching, appropriateness of design, and technical difficulty. Samuel noticed that they spent a long time in front of his shirt, pointing out details to each other and nodding approvingly. When they finally returned to the platform to announce their decision, Samuel found himself standing near Martha, close enough that he could feel the tension radiating from her. Third place went to a young woman who had made a christening gown of exceptional delicacy. Second place went to the wife of the bank president, who had created an evening gown with elaborate beadwork. And first place, announced to enthusiastic applause, went to Martha Owens for her gentleman's dress shirt. Samuel watched Martha's face transform. The careful mask she usually wore shattered, revealing joy so pure and intense that it made his chest ache. She pressed her hands to her mouth, her eyes shining with tears, and Samuel felt something shift inside him, some door opening that he had not realized was closed. He was falling in love with her. The realization should have been alarming. He had known her for barely 2 months. They had never spent time together outside the general store, never had anything approaching a courtship. But Samuel had spent his whole life around animals, learning to trust his instincts, and his instincts now told him that Martha Owens was someone special, someone worth fighting for. Martha collected her prize money with shaking hands, and Samuel collected his shirt, which he insisted on wearing immediately, changing in a side room of the courthouse and emerging to find Martha waiting for him. "It fits perfectly," he said, and it did. The shirt moved with him like a second skin, comfortable and well made in a way that his usual ready-made clothes never achieved. "I am glad." Martha was still clutching her prize money, $50 that represented months of savings compressed into one perfect evening. "Mr. Anderson, I want to thank you. Without your commission, I would never have entered, never have won this. You won it on your own merit, Miss Owens. All I did was give you an excuse to show what you could do." The fair continued around them, music and laughter and the smell of roasted corn and sweet cakes, but Samuel found himself focused entirely on Martha. In the lantern light, with happiness softening her features, she was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with mere physical appearance and everything to do with the strength he saw in her, the resilience that had carried her through whatever darkness lay in her past. "Would you like to walk with me?" he asked, keeping his voice gentle. "It is a nice evening and I have been cooped up on the ranch for too long." Martha hesitated and he saw the old wariness return for a moment. Then she nodded. "I would like that." They walked along the edges of the fair, past booths and games, through pools of lantern light and shadows. Samuel kept a respectful distance, his hands clasped behind his back, and he kept his voice low as he pointed out constellations overhead, told her stories about the ranch, asked her questions about her work. Gradually, Martha began to talk more freely. She told him about growing up in Missouri, the daughter of a school teacher who had died when she was 15. She told him about her mother remarrying a year later to a man who seemed kind at first but whose kindness was just a mask for cruelty. "He never hit me," she said quietly, "but he did not need to. His voice was enough. He could make you feel smaller than an insect just by the way he talked to you, by the volume and venom he could pack into words. My mother withered under it, became a shadow. And I knew if I stayed, I would become a shadow too, so you left. I left." Martha looked down at her hands. "I took what little money my mother could scrape together for me, and I got on a train west. Dodge City seemed like it was far enough away, and I had heard there were opportunities here. Horace Porter was hiring when I arrived, and I was desperate enough not to be particular." "He treats you poorly," Samuel said, and it was not a question. "He treats me the way a lot of men treat women they consider beneath them. He yells, he criticizes, he makes me feel incompetent and useless. But he pays me and he has not." She paused, swallowing hard. "He has not tried to touch me. That puts him ahead of some other options I had." Samuel felt anger kindle in his gut, but he kept it carefully contained. Yelling about the injustice of it would only frighten Martha, prove that he was just like the other men in her life who defaulted to volume and rage. "You deserve better than that," he said quietly. "Perhaps. But deserving and having are different things." They had reached the end of the fair grounds now, where the lights faded and the prairie stretched away into darkness. Samuel stopped, turning to face Martha. In the dim light, he could just make out her features, the question in her eyes. "Miss Owens, I would like to ask your permission to court you properly." Martha's eyes widened. "Mr. Anderson, before you answer, let me say this. I know we have not known each other long. I know you have got reasons to be wary of men, good reasons based on hard experience. But I have developed feelings for you, real and strong feelings, and I would like the chance to show you that not all men are like the ones you have known. I will not yell at you. I will not try to make you feel small. I will treat you with the respect and kindness you deserve, and if at any point you want me to stop courting you, you need only say the word." He could see Martha thinking, weighing his words against her experience. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am afraid. I know. I do not know if I can be what you want. I am damaged, Mr. Anderson, broken in ways that might not ever fully heal." Samuel reached out slowly, telegraphing his intention, and gently took her hand. Her fingers were cold despite the warm night, and they trembled in his grasp. "You are not broken, Miss Owens. You are bent, maybe, scarred, But you are still standing, still fighting, and that makes you stronger than you know. And for what it is worth, I am not looking for perfection. I am looking for you." Martha's breath hitched, and in the darkness he saw tears spill over, tracking down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, you may court me, Mr. Anderson." Samuel smiled, feeling like he had just won something far more valuable than any prize. "Would you mind calling me Samuel? Mr. Anderson is my father, and I have spent a lot of energy trying not to be him." "Samuel." Martha tested the name, and he loved the way it sounded in her voice. "And you should call me Martha." "Martha." He squeezed her hand gently, then released it. "May I walk you home?" They walked back through the fair, through the crowds that were starting to thin as families took tired children home and young people drifted toward the saloons and dance halls. When they reached the back stairs that led up to Martha's room above the general store, Samuel tipped his hat to her. "Thank you for a wonderful evening, Martha. Thank you for the commission and the encouragement and—" She paused, searching for words. "For being gentle. It means more than you know." Samuel rode back to the ranch that night feeling like the darkness was not quite so dark, like the stars were burning brighter than he had ever seen them. He was still grinning like a fool when he reached the bunkhouse, and the other ranch hands ribbed him mercilessly, but he did not care. He had Martha's permission to court her, and that was worth all the teasing in the world. True to his word, Samuel courted Martha with patience and care. He came to town every Sunday after church, and they would walk together, sometimes around Dodge City, sometimes out onto the prairie where the grass grew tall and golden in the late summer heat. He always kept his voice low and calm, even when they disagreed about something, and he was careful to ask permission before any physical contact, before taking her hand or offering his arm. Slowly, gradually, Martha began to relax around him. The flinching stopped first. She no longer jumped when he moved suddenly or tensed when he spoke with any energy. Then came the smiles, tentative at first but growing more frequent and genuine. She laughed at his stories, told her own, and debated with him about books they had both read, revealing an education and intelligence that her circumstances had forced her to hide. They had been courting for 6 weeks when Samuel first saw Horace Porter truly lose his temper with Martha. Samuel had stopped by the store on a Thursday afternoon, needing some supplies and hoping to catch a glimpse of Martha. He walked in to find Horace behind the counter, his face purple with rage, while Martha stood in front of him with her head bowed. "You gave Mrs. Hendricks the wrong order." Horace was shouting, his voice echoing off the store's tin ceiling. "She wanted 2 pounds of coffee and you gave her 2 pounds of sugar. Do you have any idea how that makes me look?" "I am sorry, Mr. Porter. I will fix it right away. Sorry is not good enough. This is the 3rd mistake you have made this week. I swear, you are more trouble than you are worth." Samuel saw Martha's shoulders hunch, saw her shrink under the verbal assault, and something in him snapped, not into rage but into cold, clear purpose. He walked up to the counter, putting himself between Martha and Horace, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried an edge of steel that made Horace stop mid-rant. "Mr. Porter, I need to speak with you about something." Horace blinked, clearly thrown off his rhythm. "What?" "Mr. Anderson, I am in the middle of— I understand that, but this is important. Business important." Samuel kept his tone level, reasonable, but there was no mistaking the authority in it. "I would appreciate a moment of your time." Horace looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Samuel's stance made him reconsider. "Fine. Martha, go check the inventory in the back. We will discuss your incompetence later." Martha fled, and Samuel waited until she was out of earshot before he turned his full attention to Horace. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. 20 years of managing men and cattle had taught him that true authority had nothing to do with volume. "Mr. Porter, I am going to say this once, and I am going to say it plain. The way you talk to Miss Owens is unacceptable. She is a good worker, intelligent and skilled, and she does not deserve to be shouted at like she is a disobedient dog." Horace's face went from purple to red. "Now you listen here, Anderson. How I manage my employees is my business, not yours. It becomes my business when that employee is the woman I am courting." Samuel kept his voice low, but there was no give in it. "And it becomes the business of every decent person in this town when a man abuses his position of power to bully someone who depends on him for their livelihood. Abuse. I have never laid a hand on that girl. Abuse does not require fists, Mr. Porter. Words can cut just as deep, and they leave scars that last just as long." Samuel leaned forward slightly, holding Horace's gaze. "I am not telling you how to run your business. But I am telling you that if I hear you shouting at Martha again, if I see her flinch one more time because of your temper, you and I are going to have a much longer conversation. And I can promise you, it will not be good for your business or your reputation." Horace sputtered, but Samuel could see the calculation in his eyes. Samuel Anderson was not just some drifting cowhand. He was the foreman of the Triple Bar Ranch, respected in the community, with connections and influence. Making an enemy of him would be poor business indeed. "I run my store the way I see fit," Horace finally said, but his voice had lost its bluster. "Then see fit to treat your employees with basic human decency." Samuel straightened. "Now, I need 10 pounds of flour, 5 pounds of beans, and a pound of coffee. Miss Owens can help me with that order." He called Martha back out, and she assembled his order with her usual efficiency, her hand steady despite the lingering tension in the air. Samuel paid, thanked her quietly, and left, but not before catching her eye and seeing the gratitude there, mixed with something else he could not quite identify. That something else became clear 3 days later, when Martha sent word through one of the ranch hands that she needed to see Samuel. He rode into town immediately, his heart hammering with concern, and found Martha waiting for him on the boardwalk outside the store. "Is everything all right?" he asked, dismounting quickly. "Mr. Porter fired me." Martha said it calmly, but he could see the strain around her eyes. "He said I was too much trouble, that my mistakes were costing him customers. He gave me until tomorrow to clear out my room." Samuel felt his hands clench into fists, and he had to consciously relax them. Getting angry would not help Martha, and it would only prove that he was no different from the other men who had let their tempers rule them. "You have somewhere to go." Martha shook her head. "Not yet, but I have the $50 from the fair, and I have been saving my wages. I have enough to rent a room at the boarding house for a few weeks while I look for other work. Or," Samuel said carefully, "you could use that money to start your dress shop." Martha laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Samuel, $50 is not enough to start a business. I told you I need at least 200. I know, and I have $150 saved. If you would accept it as a loan, not a gift, you could have your shop." Martha stared at him. "You cannot be serious." "I am completely serious." Samuel kept his voice gentle, reasonable, giving her space to think. "You have got the skill and the drive. You won a prize in fair competition. People in this town saw that shirt you made and they were impressed. You could build a real business, Martha. A place of your own where nobody can shout at you or fire you on a whim. But $150 is a fortune. What if I fail? What if I cannot pay you back? Then we will work something out, but I do not think you will fail." Samuel reached out slowly and took her hand. "I believe in you, Martha, and sometimes believing in someone is the best investment a man can make." Martha's eyes filled with tears and she squeezed his hand hard. "Why are you doing this? Why are you being so kind to me?" "Because you deserve kindness, because I care about you, and because I have more money than I need sitting in a bank account, and I cannot think of a better use for it than helping someone I love build a better life." The last word slipped out before he could stop it, and Samuel saw Martha's eyes widen. "Love," she whispered. Samuel took a breath. He had not planned to say it, not yet, but now that it was out, he would not take it back. "Yes, I love you, Martha. I know it is fast, and I know you might not feel the same way, but I need you to know that this offer has no strings attached. If you take the money and decide you never want to see me again, I will accept that. This is about giving you a chance to build the life you want, regardless of whether that life includes me." Martha was crying in earnest now, tears streaming down her face, and Samuel started to pull back, worried that he had pushed too hard, too fast. But Martha held onto his hand, keeping him close. "No one has ever loved me before," she said, her voice breaking. "Not like this. Not without conditions or expectations. My stepfather said he loved my mother, but his love was a cage, and I thought that was what love was, something that trapped you and hurt you." She looked up at Samuel, her green eyes bright with tears. "But you make me feel safe. You make me feel valued. And I think I have been falling in love with you since the day you helped me in the store, when you lowered your voice and treated me like I was worth something." Samuel felt his throat tighten with emotion. Carefully, slowly, he raised his free hand to her face, giving her time to pull away. When she did not, he gently wiped the tears from her cheeks with his thumb. "You are worth everything," he said quietly. "And if you will let me, I would like to spend the rest of my life proving that to you." Martha leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. "I would like that. I would like that very much." They stood there on the boardwalk, holding each other as the Kansas sun beat down and the town went about its business around them. Finally, Martha pulled back slightly, a smile breaking through her tears. "So we are really doing this. I am going to open a dress shop." "You are going to open a dress shop," Samuel grinned at her. "And I am going to be your first customer. I am going to need at least 3 more shirts like the one you made me. Every man at the ranch wants one after seeing mine." Martha laughed, a sound of pure joy that made Samuel's heart soar. "Then I had better get started." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Samuel helped Martha find a small space on Front Street, just 2 doors down from the milliner's shop. It had a large front window perfect for displaying finished garments, a back room that could serve as a work space, and a small apartment on the 2nd floor. The rent was reasonable, and the landlord, impressed by Martha's win at the fair, agreed to give her the first month at half price. Martha threw herself into setting up her shop with a passion and energy that was beautiful to watch. She bought fabric, thread, and equipment. She made curtains for the windows and signs for the door. She created samples of her work to display in the window. Everything from simple day dresses to elaborate ball gowns that showed the full range of her skills. Samuel helped however he could, building shelves and hauling heavy bolts of fabric, but mostly he just watched her come alive. This was Martha as she was meant to be, confident and creative, making decisions and solving problems without anyone shouting at her or making her feel small. The woman who had flinched at every raised voice was becoming someone stronger, someone who could look people in the eye and negotiate prices and stand her ground. The shop opened on the first day of October, and within a week, Martha had 3 customers. Within 2 weeks, she had 10. Within a month, she was busy enough that she was working late into the evening, her lamp burning in the window as she stitched by hand the delicate work that could not be done on her treadle sewing machine. Samuel continued to court her, but now their time together was carved out of her busy schedule. They had dinner together twice a week, usually at the small restaurant near the courthouse. They attended church together on Sundays, and afterwards they would walk along the Arkansas River that ran past the town, talking about everything and nothing, learning each other's thoughts and dreams. It was on one of those Sunday walks, in late November when the air had finally cooled and the cottonwoods along the river had turned gold, that Martha told Samuel she was ready. "Ready for what?" he asked, though his heart had started to beat faster. "Ready for you to kiss me." Samuel stopped walking. "Are you sure?" Martha nodded, turning to face him. "I have been thinking about it for weeks. You have been so patient, never pushing, never demanding. But I want this, Samuel. I want to know what it feels like to be kissed by a man I love, a man who loves me." Samuel reached for her slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind. His hands settled on her waist, gentle and warm through the fabric of her dress. Martha's hands came up to rest on his chest, her fingers splaying over his heart, which was hammering now like a drum. "If you want me to stop at any time, just say so," he murmured. "I know." He leaned down slowly and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was soft, chaste, nothing more than a gentle pressure, but Samuel felt it all the way to his bones. Martha made a small sound, might have been surprise or pleasure, and leaned into him. Emboldened, Samuel deepened the kiss slightly, tasting her lips, feeling her respond tentatively at first and then with growing confidence. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Martha was smiling up at him with a look of wonder on her face. "That was nothing like I imagined," she said. Samuel felt a flash of concern. "Was it?" "It was better," Martha interrupted. "So much better. I thought kissing would feel like losing control, like being overwhelmed, but that felt like choosing something wonderful." Samuel kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the tip of her nose, each kiss feather light and full of promise. "You will always have a choice with me, Martha. Always." They kissed again, and this time there was less hesitation, more heat. Samuel kept his hands respectful, one on her waist and one cupping her face, but he poured everything he felt into that kiss, all his love and desire and hope for their future. As autumn turned to winter and winter to spring, their relationship deepened. Samuel proposed on a warm April evening in 1879, presenting Martha with a simple gold band he had bought from the jeweler in town. Martha said yes without hesitation, and they began planning a wedding. They married in June, in the small church where they had attended services together for nearly a year. Martha wore a dress she had made herself, cream-colored silk with lace at the collar and cuffs, simple and elegant. Samuel wore the blue shirt she had made him, the one that had won the fair, and he thought his heart might burst from how beautiful she looked walking down the aisle toward him. The ceremony was brief, the words traditional, but when Samuel took Martha's hands in his and promised to love and cherish her, to protect and respect her, he meant every word with a depth that surprised even him. And when the reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel kissed his bride with a tenderness that made more than one person in the congregation wipe away tears. They moved into the apartment above Martha's shop, and Samuel began splitting his time between the ranch and town. It was not ideal, but it worked. The ranch owner, a good man named William Bradford, understood that Samuel had responsibilities to his new wife, and he gave Samuel the freedom to adjust his schedule as needed. Samuel hired a capable assistant foreman to handle the day-to-day operations when he was in town, and he threw himself into making the apartment a real home. He built Martha a bigger work table for her sewing. He installed better lamps so she could see her stitches more clearly in the evening. He cooked dinner on the nights when she was too busy to stop working, and he rubbed her sore shoulders when long hours at the sewing machine left her stiff and aching. In return, Martha made their home a haven. She filled it with light and color, with curtains she had sewn and quilts she had pieced together from fabric scraps. She cooked his favorite meals and listened to his stories about the ranch. And slowly, gradually, she opened up to him about her past in ways she never had before. She told him about her stepfather, a man named Thomas Greer who had married her mother for her small inheritance, and then spent the next 3 years making both women's lives miserable. His weapon had been his voice, she explained. He never hit them, but he would yell and berate and criticize until they felt worthless, until they believed that his low opinion of them was truth. "I watched my mother fade away," Martha told Samuel one night as they lay in bed together, her head resting on his chest. "She got smaller and quieter until there was almost nothing left of the woman she had been. And I was terrified that would happen to me too. So I left. I took her pin money and I ran, and I felt guilty about it for so long because I was abandoning her." "You were saving yourself," Samuel said quietly, his hand stroking her hair. "You cannot set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. I know that now, but it took a long time to forgive myself." Martha tilted her head up to look at him. "My mother died 6 months after I left. My stepfather wrote to tell me, and he blamed me for it. He said the shock of my abandonment had broken her heart." Samuel tightened his arms around her. "That was not your fault. Your mother made her choices and you made yours. You chose to live, Martha. That took courage." "I did not feel courageous. I felt terrified for so long, and when I got here and Horace Porter started yelling at me, it was like being back in that house, helpless and small." She pressed her hand over Samuel's heart, feeling it beat steady and strong. "You changed that. You showed me that men do not have to yell to be strong, that gentleness is not weakness. You gave me back my courage." "You always had courage," Samuel said. "I just helped you remember it." Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. Money was tight despite Martha's growing business and Samuel's steady income. There were disagreements about finances, about how much time Samuel spent at the ranch, about whether they should start a family right away or wait until they were more established. But they worked through each challenge, and Samuel was grateful for every argument because it taught him more about how to communicate with Martha. He learned that, when Martha got quiet and withdrawn, it meant she was overwhelmed and needed space. He learned that when she started cleaning obsessively, it meant she was anxious and needed reassurance. And he learned that raising his voice, even slightly, even without meaning anything by it, could send her back to that place of fear where she had lived for so long. So Samuel became even more conscious of his volume and tone. He reminded the ranch hands to keep their voices down when Martha visited the ranch. He intervened when he saw men in town treating women roughly or shouting at them in public. And slowly, Dodge City began to notice that Samuel Anderson did not tolerate men who abused their voices or their power. It was a warm September evening in 1880, more than 2 years after Samuel had first seen Martha flinch behind that water trough, when Martha told him she was pregnant. They were sitting on the small balcony outside their apartment, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of orange and pink, when she took his hand and pressed it to her stomach. "I went to see Dr. Harrison today," she said softly. Samuel's heart leaped. And he confirmed what I suspected. We are going to have a baby. Sometime in March, he thinks." Samuel pulled Martha into his arms, holding her close, feeling joy and fear and love all tangled up together in his chest. "That is wonderful news." "Are you sure?" Martha pulled back to look at him. "I know we talked about waiting another year. Plans change. And this is a good change, Martha. The best change." Samuel kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. "We are going to be parents." Martha's pregnancy was not easy. She was sick for the first 3 months, barely able to keep anything down. and Samuel spent many mornings holding her hair back while she vomited into a basin. She pushed herself too hard, trying to keep up with her growing list of customers, and Samuel had to convince her to hire an assistant, a young woman named Clara who was good with a needle and eager to learn. As Martha's belly grew, Samuel found himself becoming even more protective. He built a cradle for the baby, sanding it until the wood was silky smooth. He painted the small second bedroom in cheerful yellow, and Martha sewed curtains and a quilt in soft blues and greens. They argued gently about names, Samuel favoring traditional family names while Martha wanted something more unique. The baby came on a stormy March night in 1881, arriving after 14 hours of hard labor that left Martha exhausted, and Samuel feeling like he had aged 10 years. But when Dr. Harrison finally placed the squalling, red-faced infant in Samuel's arms, the cowboy felt tears streaming down his face. "It is a boy," the doctor said, smiling. "A healthy boy." Samuel carried his son over to Martha, who was pale and sweating but smiling weakly. "Look what we made," he said softly. Martha reached out to touch the baby's tiny hand, and the infant's fingers immediately curled around hers. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "Hello, Simon." Simon Anderson grew quickly, a cheerful baby who had his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair. Samuel discovered that all his experience with calves and foals translated surprisingly well to caring for an infant, and he changed diapers and rocked his son to sleep with the same patient competence he brought to every other aspect of his life. But caring for an infant also meant sleep deprivation and frayed nerves, and it was during one particularly difficult night when Simon was 6 months old that Samuel made a mistake. The baby had been crying for hours. Nothing would settle him, and Martha was weeping with exhaustion. Samuel, running on 3 hours of sleep after a long day at the ranch, felt his frustration building. When Simon's cries reached a particularly piercing pitch, Samuel snapped. "For the love of God, what do you want?" His voice was not particularly loud, not really, but it was sharp and tight with anger, and Samuel saw Martha flinch, saw her curl in on herself like she had that first day behind the water trough. Simon, startled by his father's tone, cried harder. The look on Martha's face was like a punch to the gut. Samuel felt the anger drain out of him instantly, replaced by sick horror at what he had done. "Martha, I am sorry. I did not mean." But Martha had already taken Simon from him, had already turned away, her body language making it clear she did not want him near her. Samuel stood there in the middle of their bedroom, listening to his wife trying to soothe their son, and felt like the worst kind of failure. He slept on the sofa that night, giving Martha space. In the morning, he made breakfast and brought it to her, setting the tray carefully on the bedside table. "Martha, I need to apologize," he said quietly. "Last night I raised my voice and I frightened you and Simon. That was wrong. I was exhausted and frustrated, but that is no excuse. You deserve better than that, and so does our son." Martha looked at him, and he could see the conflict in her eyes, the old fear warring with the love and trust they had built together. "It was one time," she said finally. "One moment of anger in 2 years. I know you are not like him, Samuel. But when I heard that tone in your voice, I was back there, back in that house with Thomas yelling at my mother, and I know." Samuel sat on the edge of the bed, careful to leave space between them. "And I swear to you it will not happen again. I am going to do better." "How can you promise that? Everyone loses their temper sometimes." "Because I will walk away before I let it get to that point. Because I will remember what it cost us, how it made you feel, and I will choose differently." Samuel reached out slowly and took her hand. "I am not perfect, Martha. I am going to make mistakes, but I am going to try every day to be the kind of man you and Simon deserve." Martha squeezed his hand. "I know you will, and I will try to remember that one sharp word does not make you Thomas Greer. We are both learning how to do this, how to be parents and partners. We just have to keep talking to each other, keep being honest." Samuel leaned forward and kissed her forehead. "Deal." That incident proved to be a turning point. Samuel became even more conscious of his voice, and he developed strategies for managing his frustration. When he felt anger building, he would excuse himself and step outside, taking deep breaths of fresh air until he was calm. When he needed to express displeasure, he did it in measured tones, explaining what was wrong without letting his voice rise. And Martha worked on trusting him, on not letting old fears control her present reality. When Samuel spoke firmly to Simon, correcting the boy's behavior as he grew into a rambunctious toddler, Martha reminded herself that firm was not the same as mean, that setting boundaries was not the same as cruelty. The years passed. Simon grew into a bright, energetic boy with his mother's creativity and his father's steady temperament. Martha's dress shop thrived, becoming one of the most popular businesses in Dodge City. Samuel was promoted to full ranch manager when William Bradford's health began to fail, a position that came with a substantial raise and more regular hours. In 1885, when Simon was 4 years old, Martha gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Lily. 2 years later came twin boys, James and Joseph. The apartment above the shop became too small, and Samuel used his savings to buy a house on the edge of town, a white clapboard building with a wraparound porch and enough bedrooms for their growing family. Through it all, Samuel kept his promise. He spoke softly to his wife and children, saving his commanding voice for the ranch and the cattle. He taught his sons by example that strength had nothing to do with volume, that a man's character was measured by how he treated those who depended on him. And he showed his daughter that she should never accept less than respect and kindness from any man who wanted to court her. Martha bloomed in the safety Samuel provided. Her dress shop expanded to include 2 employees, and she began designing her own patterns, selling them to women across Kansas who wanted to replicate her signature style. She laughed more easily now, smiled without reservation, and the flinching stopped entirely. Even when Simon or one of the twins would shout in play or excitement, Martha did not tense or shrink. She had learned the difference between anger and exuberance, between threat and enthusiasm. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1889, Samuel took Martha to dinner at the finest restaurant in Dodge City, a place they rarely visited because it was expensive and usually too fancy for their taste. But tonight was special, a celebration of a decade together, and Samuel wanted to mark it properly. Over roast beef and potatoes, wine and cake, they reminisced about their journey together. Martha, now 33 and more beautiful than ever, reached across the table to take Samuel's hand. "Do you remember that first day?" she asked. "When the gunshot went off and I hid behind the water trough?" Samuel nodded. I remember thinking you looked like a wild creature that had been hurt too many times." "I was, but you were so gentle with me even before you knew me. You lowered your voice and gave me space, and you showed me what kindness looked like." Martha's eyes shimmered with tears, but they were happy tears. "You saved my life, Samuel, not just by helping me start my business, but by teaching me that I deserve to be treated well." "You saved mine too," Samuel said quietly. "Before I met you, I was just going through the motions, working and sleeping and nothing else. You gave me a purpose, a family, a reason to be my best self." He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. "I love you more now than I did the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." Martha came around the table and kissed him, right there in the restaurant with other diners watching, and Samuel did not care one bit. This woman, this incredible woman who had trusted him with her broken places and let him help her put them back together, was his world. They walked home that night under a sky full of stars, hand in hand, talking about their children and their business and their dreams for the future. When they reached their house, they could see through the windows that Clara, who had agreed to watch the children for the evening, had put all four of them to bed. The house was quiet, peaceful, a testament to the life they had built together. Samuel pulled Martha close on the porch, holding her in the darkness, breathing in the scent of her hair and feeling her heartbeat against his chest. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For giving me the chance to prove that I was different. For trusting me even when you were afraid. For building this life with me." Martha pulled back just far enough to look up at him. "Thank you for speaking softly when I needed gentleness. Thank you for showing me what love really looks like. Thank you for being exactly who you are." They stood there for a long time, holding each other in the Kansas night, two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed. A flinching woman had learned to stand tall, and a cowboy had learned that the quietest voice could carry the most power. Inside the house, Simon stirred in his sleep and called out for his father. Samuel released Martha reluctantly and went upstairs, finding his eldest son tangled in his blankets, caught in the grip of a bad dream. "Papa," Simon's voice was small and frightened. "I am right here, son." Samuel sat on the edge of the bed and gently untangled the blankets, his voice low and soothing. "You are safe. It was just a dream." "There was a monster chasing me," Simon whispered. "Well, there are no monsters here. Just me and your mother and your sister and your brothers, and we would never let anything hurt you." Samuel brushed the hair back from Simon's forehead. "How about I tell you a story until you fall back asleep?" Simon nodded, and Samuel settled in, spinning a tale about a brave knight who won his battles not with a sword but with kindness and wisdom. It was a story he had told many times, one the children never tired of, and by the time he finished, Simon was breathing deeply, fast asleep once more. Samuel stood and looked down at his son, then crossed the hall to check on the other children. Lily was sleeping peacefully, her dark curls spread across her pillow. James and Joseph were tangled together in their shared bed, as they usually were, impossible to tell where one boy ended and the other began. These were his children, his legacy, and Samuel was determined that they would grow up knowing only gentleness and respect. They would never learn to flinch at a raised voice because there would be no raised voices in this house. They would never doubt their worth because he and Martha would tell them every day how valued and loved they were. Martha appeared in the doorway, silhouetted by the lamp she carried. "Everything all right?" "Everything is perfect," Samuel said, and he meant it. They returned to their own bedroom where they made love slowly and tenderly, celebrating their anniversary and their life together. Afterwards, Martha curled against Samuel's side, her head on his shoulder, and they talked quietly about the future. "I have been thinking about expanding the business," Martha said. "Maybe opening a second shop in another town or starting to make ready-made dresses for stores across the state." "That sounds ambitious. Would you have time to manage all that, if I had a partner, someone with business sense and good judgment?" Martha traced patterns on Samuel's chest. "I was thinking maybe my husband might be interested." Samuel felt a smile spread across his face. "Your husband is interested in anything that makes you happy. But what about the ranch? William Bradford Jr. is expecting me to run things for him. What if you did not? What if we built something together, just you and me, a business we could pass down to our children?" Martha propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "We have saved enough money. We could make this work." Samuel thought about it, turning the idea over in his mind. The ranch had been his life for so long, but the truth was, he had been feeling restless lately, wondering if there was something more he could be doing. A partnership with Martha, building a business together, watching it grow the way they had watched their children grow, that had appeal. "Let me talk to William Jr.," he said finally. "See what he thinks about me stepping down, and if he is agreeable, then yes. Let us build an empire together, Mrs. Anderson." Martha kissed him, long and deep and full of promise. "I love you, Samuel Anderson." "I love you too, Martha Anderson." More than words can say. The transition from ranch foreman to business partner took several months. William Bradford Jr. was sorry to see Samuel go, but understood his reasons, and he agreed to give Samuel 6 months to train his replacement. During that time, Martha and Samuel worked out the details of their new partnership. They would keep the dress shop in Dodge City, but expand its offerings to include ready-made clothing. They would open a second shop in Wichita, hiring a manager to run it while Martha designed the patterns and Samuel handled the business side of things. It was ambitious, maybe too ambitious, but they were determined to make it work. Samuel discovered that he had a talent for business strategy, for negotiating with suppliers and managing inventory. Martha's designs were popular, her name becoming known across Kansas as a mark of quality and style. And together, they made a formidable team. By 1892, Anderson Designs had 3 shops across Kansas and employed 20 people. By 1895, they had expanded to Missouri and Nebraska. The money rolled in, more than they had ever dreamed of having, and they used it to secure their children's futures, to invest in their community, and to help others who were where Martha had once been, trapped and afraid with no way out. They funded a women's shelter in Dodge City, a place where women fleeing bad situations could find safety and support. They sponsored apprenticeships for young women who wanted to learn a trade. And Samuel made it a policy to hire anyone who came to them with Martha's story, who had been broken down by violence or cruelty and needed a chance to rebuild. The children grew. Simon proved to have a head for business and went to work for Anderson Designs as soon as he was old enough. Lily inherited her mother's artistic talent and became the company's lead designer. James and Joseph were more interested in ranching, and Samuel helped them buy land and start their own operation, teaching them everything he had learned in his years working cattle. Through it all, Samuel kept his promise. He never raised his voice to Martha. Even in their worst arguments, even when they disagreed fundamentally about business decisions or parenting choices, he kept his voice low and calm, choosing words carefully and listening more than he spoke. And Martha never flinched, never shrank, never doubted that she was safe and loved. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1904, their children threw them a party. The house was full of people, friends and family and employees, all gathered to celebrate the couple who had built something remarkable not just in business but in their marriage. Samuel stood at the front of the room, Martha at his side, and looked out at the sea of faces. He was 51 now, his hair more gray than brown, but he felt as strong and alive as he had at 30. Martha was 48, still beautiful, still the woman who had stolen his heart behind that water trough all those years ago. "My wife and I want to thank you all for coming," Samuel said, his voice carrying easily through the room without needing to be raised. 25 years ago, Martha took a chance on a cowboy who had more hope than sense. She let me court her, let me love her, and eventually let me marry her, which was the smartest thing I ever convinced her to do. Laughter rippled through the crowd, and Samuel felt Martha squeeze his hand. "But this is not just about us. This is about what we built together, and by we, I mean all of you. Our business would not exist without the talented people who work for us. Our family would not be as strong without the friends who have supported us. And our community would not be as good without people who believe that everyone deserves respect and kindness, no matter their circumstances. Samuel turned to Martha, looking into her green eyes, seeing there all the love and trust and partnership they had built over 25 years. Martha, you taught me that the quietest voice can be the most powerful. You taught me that gentleness is not weakness but strength. You taught me what it means to truly love someone, not for what they can give you but for who they are at their core. Thank you for 25 years of being my partner, my best friend, my love. Here is to 25 more. He kissed her as the crowd applauded, and Martha kissed him back, and in that moment Samuel felt a contentment so deep it was almost physical. This was his life. This woman, these children, this community they had helped build. It was more than he had ever hoped for, more than he had ever dreamed possible. The party continued late into the night, but eventually the guests left and the house grew quiet. Samuel and Martha sent the children home, insisting that they wanted to clean up themselves, to have a few minutes alone in the house that held so many memories. They washed dishes side by side, working in comfortable silence, and when they were done, Samuel led Martha out to the porch swing they had installed years ago. They sat together, Martha tucked under Samuel's arm, gently swaying in the darkness. You ever think about that first day? Martha asked. When you yelled at that drunk cowhand and I hid behind the water trough. Sometimes, I think about how close I came to never knowing you because I did not understand how to modulate my voice. Samuel tightened his arm around her. Thank God I figured it out, or I would have missed out on the best thing that ever happened to me. I think about it too. I think about how terrified I was, how certain I was that all men were just variations on the same cruel theme. And then you spoke softly to me, and everything changed. Martha tilted her head up to look at him. You changed my life, Samuel. You gave me back myself. We changed each other's lives, Samuel corrected gently. You gave me purpose and family and more joy than I ever thought possible. We saved each other, Martha. And we built something beautiful together. They sat there on the porch swing until the stars wheeled overhead and the first hint of dawn touched the eastern sky. 25 years of marriage had not dimmed their love but deepened it, transformed it into something richer and more complex than the initial spark they had felt all those years ago. As the sun rose on a new day, Samuel and Martha Anderson walked hand in hand back into their house, ready to face whatever the future held, secure in the knowledge that they would face it together, with soft voices and strong hearts, with gentleness and respect, with all the love they had built over a quarter-century of partnership. The cowboy who had learned to speak softly, and the woman who had learned to stop flinching had found in each other exactly what they needed. And they had used that foundation to build not just a marriage, but a legacy of kindness that would echo through their family and their community for generations to come. In the end, Samuel Anderson's greatest achievement was not the successful business he built, or the children he raised, or the money he accumulated. It was the simple fact that the woman he loved never had to be afraid of his voice, and that quiet revolution, that private triumph of gentleness over anger, changed everything.